I provide journalism on the sport of mixed martial arts in hopes of stimulating a healthier MMA media and also creating a more informed fan base. The way that I see it, everyone who's watching this video right now is my friend and we all like the same thing. If we were talking about this sport in real life, we'd probably hit it off and be able to have a good conversation in public about fights that are upcoming or fights that have already happened. Engaging content is one thing, but the hallmark of good journalism is how well you inform people. So today is going to be a very informative video. I'm going to educate the public on how to not be a casual MMA fan. This is a presentation dedicated to how to be a hardcore MMA fan. If I do my job well, by the end of this video, you will never be called the C word casual again, because you'll know exactly how to pass in conversation as a person who watches this sport on a regular basis, because you do. Being a good MMA fan is so easy. All you have to do is watch every event, and that's not even including Power Slap or all of the extraneous promotions. If you miss TKO boxing, oh well, you can watch the Instagram highlights of that. It doesn't really matter. If you missed Mikey Musamenchi subbing that dude in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournament and getting the new UFC BJJ belt, who cares, man? You're not going to lose sleep over that. But actual events, fight nights, and numbered cards, we should be making those. We should be watching these live as they happen, however you can. It's also important to research history. A lot of things have happened since the sport has gained popularity through the mid-90s all the way up until now. We should go back through the Rolodex of all the different fights that have taken place, and we should watch the important ones and the moments that everybody references and make sure that we're on the same page with what's current by having the context of the things that have happened in the past to make the new things make sense. I'm going to get into this, but I think in general, especially in 2025, as they're proven to be so inconsistent, for right now, if you want to be identified as a hardcore MMA fan, it's probably for the best that you avoid hype trains and do not sponsor them until they prove themselves a little bit more, because they've been shaky lately. This kind of goes into the next point, which is staying objective. We don't want to be looking at these matchups through rose-colored lenses. We don't want to be paying too much attention to what the internet is saying about certain matchups. It's good to sit with them and then think, what do I imagine happening in this matchup? What can I visualize unfolding on my computer screen this Saturday, or whichever Saturday the fight is taking place? And it's always good to have our favorite internet personalities who we like to hear talk about the sport and whose opinions we value, but it's important to not default to these people because they're not all-knowing, and what we're dealing with are very highly unpredictable circumstances. A fight in the UFC is one of the most uncontained, controlled environments that occurs on our planet. For one person to say, yes, a fight is going to go this way indefinitely, and just because you like this person and what he says about other things, or that he's been right on other occasions, it doesn't mean that he is just the dude that you go to for your opinions and that you just vomit all of his takes. You should introspectively question what you think about these matchups, instead of just defaulting to whoever you like to hear talk about them normally. And that goes for me too. Nobody knows what happens whenever we die, so you're not going to get any of the important answers out of us anyways. The last thing that I can recommend to do, if you want to become a more hardcore MMA fan, or just get away from the C word in general and the label, if it fits you right now, you should get closer to MMA. This is something that I highly recommend for every human male to do. So I'm going to expand upon what I meant by every single point that I made on the previous slide. The first one, watch every event. And this is no matter who headlines or what time it comes on. My heart goes out to all of you UK boys for being able to wake up and make these cards on a weekly basis. If you're watching UFC in the UK, you're either very unemployed or you work the graveyard shift, or you're just a more dedicated fan than all of us. Either way, if you're waking up at 2 a.m. and staying up until 7 a.m. and botching your sleep schedule for the weekend just so you can watch these fights, salute, mate. You're absolutely cracked at Fortnite. It's been getting difficult lately because 7 days and then 2 weeks from now is going to mark the 1 year anniversary of the back-to-back Rose versus Cortez and then Lemos versus Jandaroba cards that we had to watch last year through the month of July. Earlier that year, they gave us Blanchfield versus Fioro and then Hibas versus Namajunas. And I don't remember the main events at all. But if I did look at the card lineup, I would be able to remember a few of those fights because I watched those cards. It's not glorious, but you gotta watch the cards. Even Tuivasa versus Taibora, depending on how entertaining your life is, there's probably better things that you can do than watch Tuivasa versus Taibora. But if it comes down to just playing some video games or watching UFC fights, dude, just throw it up on your phone and just prop it up against your monitor while you play games. If you're just kicking it at your house, you're not out with someone doing something on a Saturday night, you should. The UFC is so accessible. UFC fights on Saturday live as they happen are as accessible as Gooner material. And I'm sure a lot of you guys know where to find that. And as soon as you get done watching these lackluster cards, Albazi versus Tyra, Dolidze versus Hernandez, I'll be completely transparent with you guys. The last card that I just completely missed and didn't watch was the last time that Dolidze headlined. I think that I might have missed 2 of his headline cards. I'm not sure if it was purposeful, but I don't think that I've watched a lot of Dolidze's fights live, and I regret going back to cover my tracks to watch them because they were so stinking boring. But you gotta watch them anyways. Right after the Dolidze card, we're gonna get UFC 319, which is gonna be a great event. And then we're going to get the UFC Fight Night in China. And I'm going to have to set an alarm for that morning because they're probably going to be fighting at like 6 a.m. You just wake up and watch the card. It's not that big of a deal. If you're a US watcher, they tailor these events for our viewership so that it's easiest for us to catch the events out of anybody else in the world. This is a worldwide sport. We get priority whenever it comes to when the events are streamed. Even Whitaker versus Aliskerov, whenever they go to Abu Dhabi, this is at funky times whenever they stream the events. It's not that big of a deal to just wake up and watch it real quick. It's almost better whenever it's in the morning because that way you can just get it up out the way and then do whatever you got to do after that. Dudes really about this lifestyle will watch UFC on Saturday by any means. And this is just one facet of being a hardcore fan. Next, it's important to constantly be researching the history. Even with as actively engaged as I've been with this sport in the 5 years that I've been consuming MMA content, I'm still finding out about lots of different fighters that I knew nothing about the rise or heights of. I forget a lot of their names because they're uncommon most of the time, but you do see guys making edits of these contenders who had really good fights in the UFC but just fizzled out. And I think I saw a compilation of this dude's clips. His name was Timonov, and he fought at welterweight, and he was beating the crap out of Leon Edwards. And that happened. So did the Usman highlight. But before then, he was almost getting standing TKO'd by this dude named Timonov. And it's probably worth going through his career to see the rest of his fights and see what type of fighter he was. I was watching clips the other day. It was from Pride, I think. This dude named Charles Bennett. They called him the Crazy Horse, and I watched some of his highlights. This dude was like Michael Venom Page before Michael Venom Page. You learn a lot from looking at the different careers of fighters. You could go through the prime of Tony Ferguson and his downfall. It happened over the course of 25 minutes, and he actually had a big moment in this fight where he dropped Justin Gaethje with an uppercut at the end of the first round. You can then track Justin Gaethje's career and the fights that he had then afterwards with Dustin Poirier, how he knocked him out and nobody thought he was going to in that rematch. And then what most recently happened to him against Max Holloway. Merab actually does have a finish on record. It was against this dude named Rafael Stotts, who's a Bellator fighter, and this was what got Merab his contract. And there's footage of all of these different events that have happened. If you have a question pertaining to why a certain thing is the way that it is in the sport, you can find a fight to serve as your answer. And that's what's special about MMA, is that this is a broadcasted sport. And it's not like street beefs where footage can get lost because it's just some guy in his camcorder. The UFC does a really good job of archiving its fights. And even online, people are really good about reposting old fights. Like, you should watch Forrest Griffin versus Stephan Bonnar if you haven't. This is one of the most important fights in UFC history. It saved the promotion. However, they were platforming these UFC fights. It wasn't on TV. I think they were doing it purely through pay-per-views, and it wasn't working. So they had Spike air the Ultimate Fighter finale, which was an actual fight between Forrest Griffin and Stephan Bonnar. I'm going to keep it real with you guys. I'm spoiled having watched a lot of modern MMA. This fight is horrible, dude. It sucks, but it's very important. We should definitely pay homage to the fact that these two guys put on what was at the time a classic, because we didn't have modern MMA. That was the highest level of fighting at the time. We should know about their accomplishments. We should celebrate them too, because the things that we enjoy in the modern day are a result of their actions in the past. I wonder how people are going to look back at things like the Sphere event. That was a really big moment for the sport. I'm not even going to lie to you guys. I went to the Vegas Sphere, and that was an Emmy award-winning production, and there were fights too, and there were knockouts. That was cool to watch live. I'm grateful for the fact that I got to catch that. Another reason why it's important to research history is because we're all vulnerable to it. You can become victim to groupthink. You can have other people who share their opinions online frequently force their interpretations of the way that certain matchups unfolded into your brain that may be inaccurate. I just saw a video before I got on here to record of these guys talking about Makhachev gets smoked by Ilya because he was dropped by Hinato. And they put the video of Islam Makhachev clear as day slipping on his own feet after he gets hit on the shoulder with a hook that he checks. and then another one that he defends on his arm as proof to say that he was dropped clean in the middle of the cage and that Ilya is going to knock him out. And I'm sorry, that's casual speak, because it only takes a man with 2 eyeballs to see that that was a slip and that Hanato landed nothing in that sequence. The footage doesn't lie, so it's best to interpret the footage. Knowing about the past also gives context to live events. We're about to watch UFC 318, and that's going to be Max Holloway versus Dustin Poirier. They've already fought twice. There's a lot of Sazul on this matchup because the last time that they fought at 155, Dustin Poirier beat up Max Holloway. And whenever they fought at featherweight, he finished him in a triangle armbar. You can note the progression of each athlete through this and their journey that they've taken to get to the point where they're rematching each other again. It's also helpful to know history so that you can draw parallels to the outcomes of matchups that have happened that mirror other matchups that have happened. Weidman's leg break was significant because Silva had broken his leg the exact same way before him. Corey Sandhagen's win over Davison Figueiredo was even more significant because he did the exact same damage to TJ Dillashaw's leg in their fight. Whenever you start to dip into the history books, then you can really start to ask yourself questions like, okay, what's my favorite fight then? Because you've seen a lot of different ones, and it may not even be a UFC fight. It may be a Pride fight. It may be a fight from Strikeforce. I touched on this a little at the beginning. I think in 2025 we should be avoiding hype trains because a lot of them are proving that they just don't deserve us giving them clout because they're just going to blow it whenever their moment comes. There are a few fighters who have hype trains that are worthy of hype and clout, and they should get more of it, like the ones that I put next to the green hype trains text there. I would consider JDM to be a hype train because he came back from a long injury and immediately got a title shot. And that would not happen unless you were a guy that a lot of people believed in. And a lot of it was unjustifiable belief before he justified it in that fight with Bilal Muhammad. I have always been a JDM believer, but I had really nothing to stand on prior to him winning the belt. Because it's not like other people hadn't beaten Gilbert Burns in that 1.5 year layoff that he took. But dude, I really thought that Rebellis de Spain was going to be something. He knocked out Josh Parisian, and I was like, alright, John Jones, you can just retire already. We have the new heavyweight GOAT right here. And this man immediately gets handled by Waldo Cortez Acosta. And Waldo Cortez Acosta is having more longevity in the UFC than Rebellis de Spain, and he doesn't even have any hype. He loses again to Austin Lane, and then he gets cut, and like people don't even care. And 2 fights ago, he was king of the world. People really thought that Patchy Mix was going to do something too against Mario Batista. Like, these Bellator guys aren't all hype whenever they come up. I don't have any expectations for Aaron Pico. I don't like Movsar Evloev either, so if Aaron Pico does manage to pull off that KO win on some Michael Chandler one and done stuff in his debut, that would be a good ticket to cash because that would pull Movsar out of the deck of cards and keep him from putting on one of the most boring fights we've ever seen with Volkanovski. Or feeding him a free win, which everybody swears that fight wouldn't be like that. But we know that Volk pieces that guy up and it's easy. You look like a mega casual whenever you go all in on a hype train before they've proven anything in the UFC. A lot of dudes were doing this with the Payton Talbot stuff, and they came up off it. I'm one of these people. I was like, all right, Payton Talbot is going to go right to the belt. He's going to knock out O'Malley. It's going to be him, not Wellmaker. Wellmaker wasn't even a thing. Wellmaker is another green hype train dude right there, but I thought it was going to be Talbot doing what Wellmaker has been doing. And then the Frank Ocean stuff came out leading up to his fight with Honey Barcelos, and I was like, all right, big fella, I'm good on for you, man. This is not a hype train I want to have my name attached to. But pay attention to how these fighters are treated now that they're on the opposite side of being hype trains, that they have lost. Realistically, less than half ever amount to anything. Super hyped prospects in the UFC, how many of them actually do stuff? Only the ones who are really about it, and it's not that many of them. And I have fighters here like Joe Pyfer and Giga Chikadze and Ignacio Bahamundes, and I think that they're good fighters, and there could still be ways for them to turn their careers around. But like Dricus du Plessis, Ilia Topuria, and Volkanovski, those dudes are not winning those fights. And at a certain time, people were talking like they could be championship level contenders. And they're like, there's nobody stopping these dudes until they get to the belt. And that's glaze. And that's casual speak. I'm sorry, it's casual speak. It is. We're better off supporting these under the radar or proven contenders who have lost but have been around and they've won 2 or 3 fights in a row. Most recently, it's Terrence McKinney. We should load up the Terrence McKinney hype train. This guy just subbed Vyacheslav Borshev in like no time at all. And before then, it was a TKO over Damir Hadzovic. And he's asking for another fight already. If Damone Blackshear can beat Davy Grant, they just got announced to fight. Maybe a Damone Blackshear hype train resurgence. People cared about him a lot at a certain point. And then he got floored by Montel Jackson. It happens, dude. It happens. You get knocked out. This is a crazy, volatile sport. You learn a lot about someone just by asking them who their favorite fighter is. If they say one of these hype jobs, dude, Shavkat, and then you ask them about the last card, and they're like, oh, I actually didn't watch it. That's whenever they get the side eye. Or like, oh, dude, I hate Mario Batista. Patchy Mix is gonna beat his freaking face in. Oh, for real? I actually don't think that Bellator fighters are that successful in the UFC. What do you think about Bellator fighters coming and challenging in this promotion? Oh, I actually don't know what Bellator is. I just know he's a champion whatever the UFC got him from, so he's probably gonna win, right? Another thing, it's very important to stay objective. Do not predict fights on the basis of how much you like or dislike who is fighting. This is not a good thing. I fight myself all the time. It's like the Green Goblin mask. I did it the last weekend with Peyton Talbot. I genuinely was convinced that the grappler would get the best of him, but I didn't look too closely into the matchup, and I didn't see that Felipe Lima was an ex-flyweight. And if I would have just taken a deeper look at the Tapology for just a second longer, I would have seen that, and I probably would have picked Talbot, but I just don't like Talbot. I wanted to pick Prates against Gary, because I just don't like Gary. I wanted to pick Patchy Mix against Mario Batista. I was brainwashed by the Jose Aldo hate campaign that was led against this man on Instagram. But whenever you really break it down, you look at these things, these fighters win their fights against the fighters that you want them to lose to. And like, boo-hoo, man. This is MMA. You're the most equal with your opponent in this sport than in any other competition on the face of this planet. There's so many different parameters that are put in place to make sure that you have a fair competition. So it just comes down to skill for skill every single time. It doesn't matter who's sleeping with whose wife. Leave that man, his wife, and his baby alone. It's funny, but like, dude, like, it's just this is family, bro. Like, that's not cool, dude. People like to dump on Gary and not pick him to win his fights because they say things like that's not his baby. That's so crazy, dude. They're like, yeah, he's raising some baby that's not his, so I'm not gonna support him to win his fight. I don't even know if that's true or not. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. This is the ultimate fighting competition, not the ultimate fathership competition. So consequently, he could be the worst father on the face of this planet and completely neglect that child. Whenever it's time for me to make the predictions video, I may make a joke to prod at it, but it has no bearing in the way that I'm predicting these fights. Sometimes I can safely bet on guys who I know are gonna win, and I also don't like the dude that they're fighting. It was this way for Imavov in his last fight with Israel Adesanya. I wanted to see Israel Adesanya lose, and I was like, Imavov can win this fight. And I thought that he'd get it done by decision. I didn't think it would be an actual knockout, or that it'd be half as sleepy as it actually ended up being, but I was satisfied in being able to comfortably select this fighter to win the fight against the dude that I didn't want to see get his hand raised. And personal vendettas are personal vendettas, but where people start tripping is whenever they let this drama affect the way that they evaluate the skills and performances and resumes of certain fighters. Just recently, John Jones has come under fire for a lot of different things in the sport. And different personalities online are talking about John Jones' resume like he hasn't accomplished anything in MMA. He has a very illustrious career and resume. It just could be better if he would have taken fights with certain people that he ducked. And then other people bring that up as a way to invalidate his accomplishments. His accomplishments are his accomplishments. He just also did these other things which we don't like. So yes, that can just be that. We can stay objective because at the end of the day, we're dealing with fist fights, man. How many of you thought that Gregory Rodriguez was going to beat up poor old 40-year-old Jared Cannonier in their main event earlier this year? I did. I thought it was going to be a landslide. If you are a guy who engages with MMA content regularly, realize who's making the content and assess the biases of the people whose biases then become your own. Because you may be basing your opinion on MMA around someone's ideas who has a fundamental idea about the sport that you completely disagree with. Imagine one day I randomly get on here and there's a 40-minute long video explaining to you guys why Jorge Masvidal is the greatest striker in MMA history. Nobody's going to agree with that because it's wrong. For all the different takes that I've given that people have agreed with or liked the video because of, it's sullied because one of my core maxims and beliefs about this sport, that Jorge Masvidal is the greatest striker ever, I'm a casual. This is the definitive list of all the different Instagram accounts that you should be following as a fan of MMA. This is real news. The other stuff is just memes. You don't need any of that stuff. These are the best accounts to follow. Burt MMA, he has Burt MMA, Burt MMA 2, Burt MMA 3. Big Marcel 24. These guys both post fight updates and fight news. You'll see the fighters PNGs side by side, and there'll be a caption that'll detail the event and whenever they're fighting, what weight class it'll be held at, the fighter's gym as well. These guys get into the nitty gritty of all of it. It's great. Perry Punch, these guys are good at reposting clips that happen in the MMA world. So whenever some news breaks, you see the headline right there, and there's a video to give it context. These guys are great at that. Inside Fighting, they also do the same thing. I believe that they also have journalists who work to do interviews as well. These guys and the next 2 pages that I'll talk about, they do fighter interviews. And it's good content. You learn a lot about these different fighters by hearing them talk about their fights and their personal lives with these journalists. MMA Fighting is Ariel Awani's thing. He has access to pretty much any fighter on the roster to speak with. So even if you don't like Ariel Awani, his MMA Hour interviews are worth watching because he's always talking to people who have just fought the Mondays after they've performed, winners and losers sometimes. Homa Fight, these guys are just a news outlet and they post headlines as well as doing fighter interviews. They interviewed Andre Petroski not too long ago. I'll probably end up editing MMA Junkie up here too. They do a lot of the same thing. The Mac Life as well. The Mac Life and MMA Junkie. I'll probably end up putting them there too because I forgot them. And then also follow Alvin Goozy Hines on Instagram. But aside from this, Instagram is the bane of MMA journalism because what you find on it, other than actual journalism produced by a very limited amount of accounts, is just brain rot memes and hive mind jokes that are playing on things that people are taking ironic stances on, like Charles Oliveira is somehow going to beat Ilia Topuria, and then creating communities around or hate around fighters like Mario Batista for the fact that they beat Jose Aldo. These things become so conflated that people taking part in these jokes forget about the origin of the jokes. Like with the Mario Batista stuff, by the time that he got in the cage with Patchy Mix, I'm sure that 70% of the people that were watching the fight didn't even remember the Jose Aldo performance, and they were just gassed up to see him lose because that's what everyone on the internet had been talking about for weeks prior to this. We have good podcasts hosted by ex-fighters or active fighters like Pound for Pound with Kamaru Usman and Henry Cejudo. They have other fighters come on as hosts. Just recently they did an episode with Buckley. It was great, and it happened right after they fought each other. Apparently there's an episode where Bilal made Usman cry and he won't post it, and he keeps on getting roasted for that online. Michael Bisping has a really established Believe You Me podcast. Renato Moicano has the Show Me the Money podcast. There's the On Paper podcast with Anthony Smith. Certain people, like myself and what I'm trying to do here, we've created platforms to share our opinions and have followings, but your opinion is just as valuable as mine is on the internet. It's just I do this. And whenever I post videos and I go into the comment sections, a lot of the most helpful pieces of information that I learn about MMA on a weekly basis are things that you guys comment to tell me about the videos that I make. Atiba Gautier versus Robert Valentin. A dude had told me that that fight is being rescheduled to UFC 318, and I thought they just scrapped it. Great. Like, thank you guys. And I'm championing people like that because instead of just defaulting to these internet personalities, if you're a guy who's been present with this sport for a while and you've been making the events, you've been watching them and recording them in your memory, you probably have a good idea of what's going on. So that should just be overlay to whatever your core opinion is on the thing, and it shouldn't be formative because you've been here, dude. So what are you doing? Just thinking what he thinks. You saw all the material, so why are you looking at his paper? High sub count means valid takes in the eyes of most fans, and I want you guys to always be able to call me out on my nonsense. Whenever I'll watch my videos and proofread it through the uploading process, and if I let something slip, I'll make sure to make a note of it in the comments. But I'm pleading Socratic ignorance here. I went to college and stuff and I graduated, and yeah, it's cool. Like, you know, I have an education, but I'm an idiot, dude. I'm subject to human error, I should say. So the first-hand accounts are what matters. We should be listening to what these fighters, the coaches, and what the people close to them have to say about the matchups, and we should be analyzing these takes versus what we assume or what the funniest joke is. If you want to seek to become more of a hardcore fan, you must get closer to MMA, the sport itself. If you like fighting as a concept, go try it out. You may like it. It's not this aggressive see red thing. It's like playing pickup soccer. It's an all-encompassing skill that whenever you need it, you're going to be very glad that you have it. And otherwise, it's just a very nice skill to exercise, and it's fun and stress relieving. There's all types of media that you can engage with to get closer to the sport outside of just watching the events on Saturday. There's media days that happen leading up to these events. There's press conferences, individual fighter interviews that happen for these number events. Afterwards, they have full-on press conferences while they have the towels over their necks and they're all beat up and stuff if they can make those post-fight press conferences. And this is while the event is going on a lot of the times. And this is during fight nights. They have a different interview model for that. If you are actively training in the sport, you can learn different techniques from fighters who have tutorial pages. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson has a really good one. There's also Dynamic Striking and BJJ Fanatics, each for striking and grappling seminars that are taught by real UFC fighters. And even whenever it's not a real UFC fighter, it's still good stuff to just go watch and then try to go apply to your live rules and spars whenever you go back to the gym. Hours and hours of John Danaher tapes that you can be engaging with to know more about grappling sequences, so that whenever certain guys do things and techniques on the ground that are rare, you might have seen them before on one of these tapes. It's just a super niche technique that only a few people know about. I've been noticing through seeing this reposted clip of the funk roll technique, a lot of guys, they're escaping mount from this, and they always have pulled off this technique as a mount escape. I just haven't noticed it until I saw a couple of jiu-jitsu guys online make a tutorial on how to do the escape. You should know what each of these fighters sounds like. And then, like, no Diddy, bro, pause, bro. Like, you should know what each of their voices sounds like. If you're an MMA fan, I should be able to show you a picture of a fighter in the top 15 of each division, and you should be able to tell me their name and have a good idea of what they sound like whenever they talk. I think it's also good to watch other events from different organizations that feature ex-UFC fighters or dudes that you once followed the careers of. Whenever Eddie Alvarez walked away from combat sports, before he did it, he was fighting in BKFC, and he had smokers, and he had wars with Jeremy Stevens. I think Jeremy Stevens also boxed with Jose Aldo. Whenever a UFC fighter goes to box, low-key, check it out. It's worth watching. It's funny. It adds on to the storyline. Luke Rockhold fought with Paulo Costa, and that's the way that he left the UFC, but before he retired from combat sports overall, he got his teeth smacked out of his mouth by Mike Perry. That goes back into knowing the history, but if you're close to MMA, then you can watch these type of things happen live. So please engage with the right media. Sub to my channel. It's like, nah, but like, please engage with the right media, because this can become like a real circle jerky thing where we're just pedestaling a bunch of Shamil Gazievs in each division because they're funny. And it's not serious, and nobody's being for real. And I don't want that for our sport. We need to get bigger than the NFL. So that's going to take us keeping our heads screwed on straight and actually giving a hoot. So who's with me, you guys? Alright, fellas, I'm going to end the video here. Thank you for sticking around to this point. Please do like, comment, and subscribe. I'm going to catch you in the next one.